normal.
EPA chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight sound feed off. Bring in, feed off. Off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
All right, folks, it's time for another exciting Intrepid Museum virtual event today. It is a very special event we're doing today because we're going to be talking about AstroAccess, some special guests who've actually done a little bit of an astronaut-style training and how AstroAccess increases accessibility to those sorts of things and experiences for people with disabilities. So our show today will have some special guests coming up in about 30 minutes, but you'll notice some different things on the screen here today. We've actually got real-time captioning that's happening, like literally whatever I say will appear in that box because someone is there listening to me, pity them a little bit, and typing what I say into the box. So if you can read along what's happening there, feel free to follow along there. But if you want to change the font size or open that in another browser window or something along those lines, there's a link that I am going to put into all of the chats for you. It'll take me a little bit of time to get to all of the chats, so please be patient. But there is a link that you can click on and change exactly how you experience those real-time captionings, which is really cool. I'll make sure that I get it into all of the different chats because there's like 5 streams here. Also, you can see that we have ASL interpretation today over here. That will be visible on all the screens as we talk with our special guests. So that is another way that we are trying to increase the accessibility of the show here. And all of this is through and with Intrepid so that we can help more and more people experience the different things that we do here on Virtual Astronomy Live. So, like I said, our special guest today will be from AstroAccess, talking about their experiences doing some astronaut-style training, zero-G flights and that sort of stuff. But first, we've actually got a little bit of a pre-show, and I am going to have a special guest from the museum who you haven't seen on the show before here talking about some of the accessibility programs at the museum. So please welcome to today's Virtual Astronomy Live, Ellen Pizer. Ellen, how are you doing today? Excellent. That's sort of a big deal because you have the museum, you have all the exhibits, all the different things to experience at the museum, but sometimes someone like me may take it for granted. I walk around the museum, I see the planes, I hear the presentations, but not everybody can experience the museum in that way. So tell us a little bit about how Intrepid makes all the history, all the artifacts, all the content at the museum accessible to more people.
Promote the awareness and understanding of history, science, and service through our collections, our exhibitions, and our programming in order to honor our heroes, educate the public, and inspire our youth. And in order to fulfill that mission, we recognize that accessibility and inclusion of people with disabilities is really vital to our work. So what I do is I'm on a team that ensures accessibility through programming, resources, and infrastructure. And I work together with my colleagues throughout the museum in order to do that.
All right.
So one of the things that we do, or that I do, is I work with our Autism Advisory Council. And what our Autism Advisory Council is a group. It started off around 10-ish years ago with parents of children that come to our museum and come to our programs a lot. And then over time, we changed and adapted for this council to include adult autistic self-advocates that come to discuss our new exhibits and our new initiatives. They give us feedback on our different programs, both our specialized programs and our public programs. And we also talk about current concerns in the community and we share resources with each other because we do want to be connected to New York City and the place we're at and make sure that we're serving the people that we'd like to. So that's our council and how it evolved over time. I'm really happy and proud to be a part of it. And I'm really excited for the council season this year, which will be running through the spring. We meet quarterly.
Is there information about that on the website, or how can you get more info? Is it open for people to participate in? How does that work?
Yeah, so there's a little bit of information about that on our website. There's a lot of information about this, things that we talk about at the council on our website. And we work with partners in order to find new council members and recruit them. And we also, when people come to our programs, come to our museum, we chat with them. And if they're a good fit for our council, we invite them to come on in. Our council is something that's always evolving and always changing. And we always love to get different and diverse perspectives to sit on this council and give us feedback.
Gotcha. So it's not just about changes that the museum can make, right? It also sort of gives help to the people that are on the council or other people that sort of experience things that way, right?
Yeah, sometimes it's really nice for parents to connect with adult self-advocates and vice versa. Folks can get a lot of different kinds of advice there, connect with people that might have similar experiences or completely different experiences in order to become part of a community here.
Okay, excellent. Well, what other sorts of programs does Intrepid have for increasing accessibility?
Sure, absolutely. So a lot of the things, both that we have for folks that come in to self-guide. So say you're just a visitor walking through the front door. We have a lot of different things that you guys can hook into in order to experience and connect with the museum fully. Some of those things are accessible exhibit design.
Right.
So we work with our exhibits team, our council, and user experts, some of whom we recruit through our council, in order to test and prototype our new exhibits that we have at Intrepid. In the past, we've prototyped our submarine exhibit on the pier. We've done a program called Sensory Tools, which if you'd like to learn more about that, you can check out the November 2021 free show, which we were on then as well. And we'll be prototyping in the future in order to ensure our exhibit design is accessible as possible.
Yeah, so is that something you do like while you're, I guess, designing the exhibit? Do you sort of like build it out or mock it up and then have people sort of come and experience it and provide feedback? It doesn't seem like you would, okay, we're all done with the exhibit, come tell us how we did, right? Is that like an iterative process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's an iterative process. And members of our team work really closely with members of our exhibits team in order to give feedback, sort of even in the very, very beginning stages of what a exhibit can be. And as things become a little bit more concrete, as things sort of get mocked up, we're able to bring some different people in order to test it out and give us some of that extremely important feedback to make sure that everybody that visits our exhibits can key in and interact with them as well as, everybody can.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, you think of an exhibit, you're walking through the museum and you have a little block of text, right, that has some information about this space artifact or whatever. I'm going to say space artifact because I like space. And, we can sort of see the space artifact. It's a capsule hanging or something like that. What other things can you do to make an exhibit like that more accessible? Like, one of the things you think of with a museum is you can't touch a lot of the artifacts, right? So how do you make an artifact that we can't touch more accessible to people who might experience it that way?
That's a great question. So one thing that we have is our mobile guide. Our mobile guide is something that you can interact with throughout the museum. It works on your own personal device.
Right.
And it includes verbal description, which is especially useful for individuals that are blind or have low vision.
Right.
We also have that you can check out when you come into the museum, a tactile guide with talking pen. And this guide has large print as well as braille and raised line images of a lot of those things that are behind glass. So that you can touch and feel. They also provide texture, which I really like.
Right.
So you can really get that texture of, say, what that machine tool behind the glass is like, with that 3D raised line, which is great.
So it's not always something that's like, I guess, physically located at the exhibit. Like we may see something that has like a braille raised print or something like that at the exhibit, but there are other things that aren't, I guess if you walked up to the spacecraft or whatever, you wouldn't see it, but you can check out some of these things like when you sort of come past the welcome desk or something like that. Did I get that right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we do have different things that we include in our exhibit space that are tactile.
Right.
For example, we just opened up an exhibit all about our sick bay, which is a space that we're working on restoring at the ship. And we have a tactile map outside of the exhibit to describe this space as it is within the ship. Which also includes raised line and braille.
Right.
And inside the exhibit, we have a tray that has different medical tools that the doctors on Intrepid would have used that you can touch and explore with your hands, which is great for both folks where tactile is important, and also everyone, because who doesn't like touching stuff?
Yeah, I mean, you're describing this to me, and I was like, geez, I sort of want to touch the stuff from behind the exhibit. Like, you can't like reach over the red rope or anything like that. Don't do that if you go to the museum. But if there are options where you have some other way to sort of experience those things that you normally wouldn't be able to, it almost opens up a little bit more way to experience things for lots of people, right?
Absolutely. And, we really try to build in some of those experiences. For example, in the past, we had an exhibit all about cakes on board, and our exhibits team, with just a little prompting from us, made this wonderful full-scale touchable replicable model of a cake was on board Intrepid. Which was amazing.
I think I've seen that there. Like there's a huge cake and you're like, is this a real cake? What is this? So
it looks really real. I've definitely had people stop and like take closer looks at it and before figuring out that it's plastic.
Gotcha. All right. What other sorts of things, like you talked about the programs, we talked about some of the ways that the museum looks at its exhibits to make sure that they're more accessible. What other sort of things are there? Are there like special weekends or days or anything like that? Or I know sometimes maybe people don't want to exhibit or experience the museum when it's loud and crowded and a lot of people sort of jostling around. Are there special times where you can sort of visit the museum and have be a little bit more chill experience? Less people, less crowds?
Yeah, absolutely. Running specialized programs is one of the things that I do at the museum. One of our programs that we do is called an all hands program. It's for individuals with disabilities, and that's a group program.
Right.
So you can come during the week or during the weekend with your Boy Scout troop, with your social club, with your group, and we will create a specialized program for you based on what you would like to experience at the museum.
Gotcha. I have a photo here of a bunch of people. I think, is this in the, I don't know, is that in the Concorde?
That is. So we have another program called Early Morning Openings, which are for individuals with developmental disabilities, ages 3 to 17. And it's sensory friendly. So it's before the museum opens. There's no crowds. It's just the people that register for our program.
Right.
And we turn off different things that might be a little disruptive for folks. So we turn off our movie that plays when you walk in and the sounds, and we
Right.
make sure that some of the lights in our exhibits aren't blinking and things like that. And the last one we did was Concorde themed. So we have a large plane called the Concorde on the pier,
Yep.
and we opened that up for exploration. And it was really fun. You can see one of our educators handing out Concorde seatbelts.
Are they seat belts? Okay.
Which would have been on, and folks can touch and explore, and compare a Concorde seatbelt to your seatbelt in your car. What's similar and different and things like that.
That's what like the thing that sort of made me hesitate here was I was like, I don't know, that looks pretty big for the Concorde. Like I thought the Concorde was really small inside, but this is the Concorde. I'm glad I got that right. I psyched myself out for a second there, thinking that wait, is this what other planes can you get inside of the museum? It's the Concorde though. Whew. So let's see. I mean, we've covered a lot of things. We've covered the different programs and stuff like that. Is there anything else that you want to tell people about?
Sure. So we also have a camp, summer camp, called All Access Maker Camp. It's for children with developmental disabilities. We do it once in the spring and 2 weeks over the summer. And that's a really wonderful, really cool experience. We get a lot of folks that are really enthusiastic about space,
Right.
or about airplanes, or about different things like that. And they come for camp, and it's a really wonderful experience. So if folks would like to learn more about any of the programs we do, and there's even more than we've mentioned, as well as our camp, then they should definitely come check out our website. We have an accessibility resources page, and that gives you sort of a great breakdown of if you're coming to the museum, what are some different supports that are available. And then we have also a page on our different programs, which also include Access Family programs, tea dances, which are for adults with dementia and their care partners.
Right.
We also do verbal description tours on request. And we're planning a verbal description day during Kids Week, which is one of our largest fairs that we do at the Intrepid in the spring. So
Gotcha.
we're really excited about that.
All right. Well, I think that's one thing that's important to sort of, I guess, communicate, right? Some of the things are there at the museum. You don't have to sign up in advance or anything like that. But a lot of these programs you do need to sign up for, get on the list, say in advance that you want to participate, or arrange the special access in advance of your trip to the museum. So the website there is really important to make sure you visit the website, intrepidmuseum.org, and see all the different things they have there, because some of the things do need to be signed up for, scheduled, just coordinated or organized in advance, right?
Yeah, because we got a lot of really great activities for folks, and it's helpful when planning to know how many people to expect. But if anybody ever has any questions about what we have available or what we could organize, then definitely shoot us an email. We would love to tell you more, or maybe even tell us more about what would be helpful. We'd always love to hear from folks.
Excellent. All right. I mean, we still have a few minutes here. If we have a couple other things we want to talk through, did I cover most of the things? I know I have a couple more images here that I can share, or what do you want me to talk about?
Why don't you throw up those images, and I can tell you what's going on.
All right. Well, we've got you just mentioned Kids Week. We've got something happening on the Kids Week stage here in Hangar 3. It looks like.
Yes, indeed. So this past Kids Week, we had ASL interpreted presentations, and that's actually me on stage. I'm doing a talk about different constellations you would find in the night sky. We have some great audience feedback and audience participation.
Yep.
And ASL interpretation, just like is happening right now during our pre-show,
right,
is something that we are increasingly including in a lot of our events. For example, our Free Friday, one of our last Free Friday astronomy nights, where we had a chat with Fred Hayes, also included live ASL interpretation on site, which was something we were really excited to provide, and which a lot of people came on site for, and also were able to access at home through the live stream.
Yeah, I was really happy about that because we had the ASL interpreters there live, and I was running the stream for that. We brought a dedicated camera and some equipment specially so that we could make sure that the people watching the stream could also see the ASL interpreter back home wherever they're watching from. So it's great whenever we have the opportunity to increase the accessibility, a little bit of extra technology, a little bit of extra folks helping out do the things and increase the accessibility. It's really nice when we're able to make it so that more people can enjoy all the great things that the museum does.
Absolutely.
All right. I think I've got one more thing. We talked about the early morning opening, right? We talked about the Kids Week and the stage here. What do we have here? It looks like we're in the cockpit of a helicopter, maybe?
Yeah, so this is from our last Access Family program we did. This was for our version of that program that's for teens and adults, 14 plus. Our Access Family programs are on select Sundays a year, and they are for individuals with developmental disabilities and their families. We do those both in person, which is what this picture is from,
right,
as well as virtually, in order to, cast a wide net, because we understand that, there are a lot of folks that that are interested in our content and would like to learn more. And some of those folks are local, some of those folks are farther away. And for some people, it can be hard getting there, or it's just not the day. So we try to offer a virtual option as well as an in-person one as well.
All right.
And that was from our last in-person one. It was a great time. We talked all about heroes and superheroes, and sort of there's symbolism and different symbolism you can find on board.
Like on board the actual carrier, right? Because there's all sorts of symbolism. There's badges and patches and things on the walls and squadron emblems and all these sorts of things. There's lots of symbolism if you think about bringing together groups or having people work together. Symbolism and sort of, I guess, identity is a big part of that, right?
Absolutely. And I know that, it was really important for all the different jobs that were on board Intrepid when it was part of the Navy. It was certainly a big part of flying airplanes for the Navy. And it's a big part for astronauts too.
Yep.
Astronauts design patches for each of their missions. Definitely the different types of symbolism associated with that is really cool to dig into.
Everybody loves a good mission patch, especially when there's little Easter eggs on it, like a clover leaf or why does this have a dog on it? Like, come on, NROL, what's going on? Or a chameleon, I guess, sometimes. But I believe here, Ellen, that is going to bring us to the end of our pre-show segment. We'll have our special guest coming up here, but really quickly, thank you so much for spending time with us and helping us understand all the extra work the museum does to make it so that more people can experience what y'all have.
Wonderful. Well, I'm so happy to be on and chat with you guys. I hope more people come to our programs, come to our museums, reach out. It's really important that we welcome all, and we do our best to be as inclusive as possible. So we always love to know what works, and we always love feedback if there's things that we could do better.
All right, excellent. Well, Ellen, thank you so much here. Y'all, give a big round of applause for Ellen sharing that with us here. I am going to hop over really quickly, and thanks again, Ellen. I'm going to see if we can't get our special guests here for the main portion of the show. You'll give me just a few minutes. Sometimes we play a little bit of a video here. Today I'm not going to play that video. We're just going to have the little standby screen really quickly. And when I come back, we will have our special guest from AstroAccess. This doesn't quite fit in the screen correctly. That's okay. It's all right. We will have a couple folks from AstroAccess, including a voice that you've heard on our streams before, who's helped us with some of our own commentary here at NSF. So we will be right back. Give me just a minute or two to get the new guests on the Zoom call here. And when we come back, we'll talk about AstroAccess and how they increase accessibility for folks with disabilities to some of the things that are like astronaut training related. So I'll be right back. This is today's, or this month's, I guess, Virtual Astronomy Live with Intrepid Museum and NASA spaceflight here. Okay, folks, a little bit of juggling there. Had a little bit of a technical difficulty, so sorry for the lack of music on the standby screen. But we're ready now with our special guests here to continue on with today's Intrepid Museum Virtual Astronomy Live. Got some folks from AstroAccess that we're going to talk to. Really quickly, though, remember the streams don't just do themselves. They sort of continue happening because y'all keep showing up. But also, the Virtual Astronomy Live is supported through a NASA cooperative agreement awarded to the New York Space Grant Consortium. So massive thanks for helping us keep these things going. Let's hop over into our main event with our special guests from AstroAccess. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, I think I got all the cameras we're supposed to have. Do we have everybody's audio? How's everybody doing? Wave at the camera. I think we're good now. Whew, it's a lot to juggle. There's a lot for one person to sort of juggle when we have all the things going on here. But Summer, Dina, Sawyer, how are y'all doing?
We are doing pretty good. I'm just entertained by watching you, work your magic behind the screen. Yes, that could be a show in and of itself.
We just
I'm
don't.
doing great.
So true.
And it's always entertaining to watch Das juggle things. In fact, first time I actually watched him do it was at an event on the Intrepid a bunch of years ago.
Yep. Trying to figure out which cable needed to be plugged into where.
Yeah.
But I am going to turn the show over to y'all. Summer, if you want to do a more detailed introduction of Dina and Sawyer here, it is all y'all's. And I'll hopefully not break anything.
Sure thing, Das. Thank you so much for getting us set up like always. You are a magician. So welcome, Sawyer and Dina. I'm so excited to talk to you both today about AstroAccess. And I'm just going to give a tiny little version of your bios for everyone watching so they have some context for your awesomeness. So first we have Sawyer Rosenstein joining us. He's an avid space enthusiast and space reporter. He's interned with the communications office at NASA Goddard, hosted a weekly on-air segment called Science with Sawyer, and currently hosts the Talking Space podcast. And Sawyer flew on the first AstroAccess zero-G flight in 2021. And also joining us is Dina Lambert, and she currently serves as the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Accessibility Lead for NASA's Early Stage Innovations and Partnerships portfolio within the Agency Space Technology Mission Directorate. Dina, that's a big business card to have right now.
Yeah, they didn't quite fit it on one. So there's lots of acronyms and alphabet soup. So
yeah. But Dina works to advance the research opportunities for innovators in underrepresented communities, including people with disabilities. And Dina is one of the AstroAccess ambassadors who will fly on her first flight next month. Is that correct, Dina?
Yeah, actually in December 14th.
It's December. Okay, great. Just to start, because I'm going to guess that a lot of people haven't heard about AstroAccess. And so could one or both of you kind of give some context for this cool organization that is it's only becoming a being in the last couple of years. Isn't that correct?
That is correct. It really kicked into overdrive in 2021 last. And the main goal with AstroAccess is to take people with all kinds of different disabilities and see if it's possible to make space accessible for everyone. So that includes people who use wheelchairs, people who are blind or deaf or neurodivergent. Basically a way, since space seems to be a great equalizer for people anyway, why not make it a great equalizer as well for people with disabilities?
Yeah, and I guess what I would add to that is, you know how sometimes I'm a Star Trek fan or a Trekkie, and you'll have those episodes where they go back in time at the earliest days of space flight, and I see AstroAccess as being a part of that story of hopefully that we as people with disabilities are coming up with our own solutions, identifying the challenges, and kind of making a way for exploration to be inclusive for everyone.
And now, since I know you are both fellow space nerds, I kind of want to hear just a little bit more about how you got interested in space in the first place, and then how you came to AstroAccess, or how you learned about them and then subsequently applied. Sawyer, you want to go first?
Sure. I actually got into space as a result of being in a wheelchair, oddly enough. I was sucker punched by a bully in middle school, which caused a spinal cord injury. And I used to be a professional actor, couldn't go back to an acting camp that I used to go to. And so that's when I joined the Challenger Centers for Space Science Education, which was created after the Challenger disaster. And they run simulated space missions and teach all about astronomy. And I fell in love and wanted to know everything I could about space after that. And that's how I became the space geek that I am today. Just continued reading and following up on it. And that's where we got to. But in terms of finding out about AstroAccess, it actually happened to be a friend of mine who works with Zero G who said, hey, we're trying to get people with disabilities to go weightless and to do some experiments. And it's been a dream of mine to always fly on one of those Zero G planes. And so I had to apply and was very lucky to get accepted, and actually found out that I was going to be flying while at the press site for the Inspiration 4 launch last year.
Ooh, that's a nice out of this world serendipity moment. What about you, Dina?
Well, I am really lucky enough to work for NASA, and some people believe that we kind of sit around having coffee with astronauts, and for some folks that's probably true, but it's always kind of like, wow, when you see the various announcements of the astronaut crew, you're kind of like, well, where do I fit in some of that? So I saw some of the announcements for AstroAccess for the first flight, and I have a young son, and I was like, oh man, can I really do that? And one thing I want my son to know is that if he can dream it, he can go after it, and I want to be the example for him to follow. So I was like, why not apply and bring the knowledge that I have in spaceflight along with me. And thankfully they selected me to be on this upcoming flight. So yeah, it's a bit of, courage to say, hey, let's go do this. But definitely a lot of pride in being a part of the crew, second, crew.
What's the selection process like? Was, there just sort of interview, or did you have to make a proposal or present something that you wanted to do on the flight? Or, yeah, was it competitive?
Yeah, actually, I would say, sorry, it's probably all of the above. There was an initial application online with, sharing your experiences and things you like to bring, as well as I believe it was a 2 to 3 minute video that you kind of communicated what you thought of space exploration and the ideas that you brought forward with experiments. And then there was an interview process with Anna, the director of AstroAccess. Mm-hmm. And yeah, so it kind of went from there. So I think, Sawyer, your experience was similar, maybe?
Yeah, it was very similar for Flight 1, of the same thing, explaining your background, your interest in space, creating that video, and even a little mention of, what are some things that you might want to do once you were, if you're selected to be on that flight. I didn't end up with a second interview. Again, they gave me a fake second interview, which turned out to be the surprise that I was going to be flying on the flight. They literally they said we need to do a second interview to follow up, to narrow it down. And all of a sudden, in the middle of the interview, one of the questions was, so how does it feel to be a member of the first flight crew?
Nice. Best surprise interview question ever.
Absolutely. I don't think I've ever been that speechless before.
Yeah.
Now, Sawyer, this is a photo of your flight, and I guess your flight crew that you trained with?
Yes, that is the AstroAccess Flight 1 ambassadors that flew on the plane. And they are some of the most amazing people you'll ever meet. There's so much diversity in terms of backgrounds, what they study, where they're from, disabilities as well. And to see everyone come together to make this flight happen and to complete some pretty cool experiments was, I think, one of the more amazing parts of this flight. Not just getting to experience it, but the teamwork and camaraderie that we developed after having only met in person about 3 or 4 days before this picture was taken.
Wow. So do you have to do training before the flight, individually or together as a whole crew?
There is some, yes. There's the group calls with the ambassadors and with the entire team to kind of get the game plan going, and then certain disability groups also kind of grouped up to talk about the different mobility experiments or the different experiments for people who are hard of hearing, different things like that. But it really was kind of, we had our own agendas, but we all had our team goal of getting as much research done as possible.
Yeah, I would say my experience so far has been very similar. There's a very consistent cadence of meeting weekly to go over the flight operations. And there's also other components of AstroAccess, such as development and logistics. And so, there's more hands on deck. In addition to the flight crew, there's also the ground crew as well. And then the subgroups that Sawyer mentioned, like for instance, I'm on the blind crew and we work asynchronously. And this year, a really cool component is that they open the application up to international participants. So we do have some ambassadors who are, one of them is from Australia. And again, like I'm pretty excited to meet these folks and talk to them. What's really interesting is that each parabola lasts about, I think it's like 20 seconds or so. And so, as we're thinking of experiments and down selecting to the ones that we can actually do, we have to frame them into, 20-second increments of, what can you realistically do in that amount of time, which, can seem like a lot, but can also go by really fast. So that's really kind of the, interesting training that you do, offline before you get there. And I'm assuming once we get there, we'll be able to practice more as a crew before flight.
Yeah, the day before the flight. Oh, sorry.
Go for it.
The day before the flight, we had the opportunity as well to get on the plane just to see where everything is, work out some of the logistics you might not think of. So, for example, I can't walk, so how am I going to get from my airplane seat, which there are normal ones in the back, to the floating area, which has no seats? So we had to work out things like that. So it was a bit of a process, but it was also fun to try to work and figure all of those things out. And I will say from experience that those 20 to 30 second parabolas feel closer to 5 seconds during most of them when you're actually on it.
Yeah, I was going to say, so this is the proper, everybody's heard of like the vomit comet, like you're going up and down, up and down, up and down. How many of those parabolas are you doing on this flight?
The first flight, we had 15 total parabolas. The first one was Martian gravity, which is 1/3 G. The second you're actually seeing right now on the screen, that was 1/6 G, which is lunar gravity. We did 2 of those. And I have to say that was probably one of the more unique ones. As great as the 0G was, there was something spectacular about this 1/6 G, because I don't know if you can tell in this picture, but for the first time in 15 years, I was basically standing on my own. The first flight, we kind of pushed off the ground a little and just hopped around like a bunny, for lack of a better way to describe it.
Right.
So that's kind of what I figured would happen for the lunar one. So all of a sudden I push up and my feet acted like a pendulum, and the next thing you know, I'm upright. And thankfully, the 2 people who were with me, Will and George, there, I was able to grab onto their shoulders really quick and realize, oh my gosh, I'm standing. I'm actually looking at eye level with people on this plane. And it was such a surreal but cool moment that the second we entered that first lunar parabola, they said, what do you want to do for the second one? I just said, I want to do that again.
Yeah. And what's really cool is that the kind of the team leads will ask, they've been asking us, what are some, stretch assignments, do we want to use? And I think in this second flight, we'll try for 20 parabolas. We know that the increased number of parabolas that you do, I believe that's why it became the vomit comet, because your body can only take so many changes, and I I don't know if it's pressure or gravity, but, somewhere I'm imagining we're going to shoot for, somewhere between like 15 and mid 20s as far as parabolas. And it's kind of interesting to use this micro G environment to find out what kind of, challenges may exist, because in, normal, everyday walking around, for myself as a blind person, I use my hands for orientation. I use a cane or a guide dog, for mobility, but, just kind of walking out around the house, I may use my hands just to kind of check and make sure where I am. But in a zero G environment, any kind of pressure or motion could easily change the orientation of where you are in space.
Right.
And so, one of the experiments that we're thinking of is how can you quickly identify where you are? How does orientation change for someone who's blind? And how can you maintain that sense of orientation in zero G?
Yeah, because I would imagine it's also very important to orient yourself quickly when the parabola, whichever point of that flight is, when the gravity comes back with a vengeance.
Yes.
That was one of my experiments on my flight too, was how many times can I basically land back on the target of if I needed to get to a spacecraft seat, say for reentry. I mean, if you think of the Blue Origin flights, you're weightless for 2 or 3 minutes. So it's great, but you got to make sure you can get back and strapped in before reentry. And I'm happy to say I made it back 14 of the 15 times. And that one other time, it was a little neck pain on the way up. That was all.
Yeah.
I'm glad it wasn't too bad.
Yeah. And that's what's awesome too, because I know for just in, regular, aviation or flight, protocols, as a blind person, or just even a person with a disability, you're kind of seen as the most vulnerable population. And I think with this AstroAccess mission is to kind of disrupt that dynamic of saying that we can equally, egress and know where we are. We can take part of experiments. We can be equally contributing, mission, crew members. And that, I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I agree. And I'm really curious to learn more about how each of you or each of your groups come up with what kind of experiments or what kind of tests that you're going to run. Is that something that where a bunch of you all bring your ideas to the table and then you kind of converge on one or two of them, or can you do multiple ones?
Oh yeah, you definitely can. And that's the beauty of having multiple people in each group, and the fact that each person has a slightly different disability. I mean, on my flight, I was the only one with a complete spinal cord injury. So there were people that were partial, there were people that had prosthetics, who are all in the mobility group, but they're all different types of disabilities. So it allowed for us to try so many different things. So for someone with a prosthetic, is it easier to float with the foot on or off? If you needed to, could you take it on or off in zero gravity? For me, it was, again, finding a way to get back to the seat once I landed. So we all kind of had a nice brainstorming session and came up with all these great ideas. And like we were mentioning earlier, and Dina said, it's kind of then parsing it down, especially once we got there to, okay, which of these are the most practical, considering you only have 15 parabolas, 20 seconds each, and keeping also in mind that the first few are all about getting adjusted to the feeling of zero G, as you can see by my face.
Yeah, and what's really great is that AstroAccess has contributing members that are part of the the medical team that are making sure that folks are safe, and the safety folks, because it mimics and mirrors much of what we do in NASA for when we have our flight missions, for safety protocols. I don't know if medical protocols are the same, but just the idea that you have a lot of different folks with different expertise coming together to support one mission and one flight. And what I would also say is that the experiments, which while the blind crew, we've been working on things that would answer some questions that we have. our hope is through universal design that it will benefit everyone on the flight. So that's where we may say, hey, we would like for the deaf or hard of hearing crew to kind of take a look at this, or on the mobility crew, hey, can we have someone test this out for possibly 1 or 2 parabolas? Because you want to know, are your results repetitive, repeated, for, hopefully scientific testing, that it's not just a fluke, but hey, it's replicable.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Das, can you put up the picture that shows like the flyers and flight support, I think? So I just want to, I think it's called flyers and in-flight support.
Yeah, this one. Ta-da!
Yeah, because I was going to say, so Sawyer, you have a lot of additional people, like with the pictures that we've seen of just you floating too, where you had 2 people helping you. But I also see somebody in a blue astronaut suit. So who else was joining you on your flight?
That is the amazing Katie Coleman. She has flown to space multiple times, and she was really helpful to talk with as well, getting that experience from someone who has been weightless for long periods of time and experienced zero gravity. To have that experience and guidance was phenomenal. And it was a great learning experience both ways. I think we each learned so much about each other in terms of space flight and disability. And she has been a fantastic ambassador as well, continuing to spread the word that AstroAccess does as she talks about her spaceflight experience. And I'm proud to call her a friend now. But the whole team was unbelievable. And part of that was making sure that we could do this safely. Because that was always my one thought with doing the zero-G flight, as someone who can't walk, was how am I going to do this safely? And that was part of the discussion process as well. Not just what are we going to do on the flight, but how are we going to make this as safe as possible for everybody. And I was very fortunate to have the amazing George Whitesides helping on one side and Will Pomerantz on the other. Both were also in the space industry. And this really was a total team effort.
So besides the discovery of the 1/6 gravity where you could actually stand, what were some of the other things that you yourself were testing or interested in testing about your experience?
So one of the things was point-to-point travel, basically. So if I wanted to go somewhere and get back, could I do that? Could I aim myself to a spot and move backwards? A lot of people think once you go into zero gravity, it's like swimming and you start kicking your legs. First off, I can't. But second off, if you do, it's useless. It's not water, it's zero gravity. So it's just more kicking people by accident when you do that. But it was, how does that work as well? And that was the other big thing, was what to do with my legs. And I believe there's a photo of me with the knees bent experiment. And basically it was trying to figure out, what can I do with my legs? Can I get them into a specific position? Is it better for me to get around or to station keep, aka staying in place, if my legs were bent versus extended? And as you can see, we use some very complex technology around my legs called Velcro. That's all it is. And there's a little loop made in the flight suit, because the nice thing about that microgravity environment is that it still has the mass, but it weighs basically nothing. So I could lift up my entire legs just by that strap with one finger and position them exactly as needed. So the knee to chest ended up being a great way to kind of stay in place if you don't mind your face hitting the ceiling every time.
It's a trade-off, right?
Yeah, so I mean, those were the main ones, was really nailing the landings, traveling, moving point to point, and then what is the best position for my legs and what's the easiest way to manipulate them.
Did you come up with a best position or conclude that one was better?
For me, at least, in terms of wanting to stay in one position, the knees bent really did help me sort of station keep and stay oriented, because otherwise, if you move a little bit with your upper body, the momentum will swing your legs and there is no resistance to stop them, so they could just keep on swinging. And the other important thing that strap was doing was keeping my legs together, because I didn't want to be doing the splits midair. And all those worked.
That's incredible. Das, I'm still got plenty of stuff to ask, but I wanted to check in with you and see if there were any questions that were coming in.
I can get a couple here if y'all talk just a bit more. Remember, folks, if you're watching and you have a question for us, tag us in chat, and we will take some of your questions for our ambassadors from AstroAccess here. Give me just a second, and I will bring a couple up. If y'all can keep chatting for a second.
Sure.
Yeah.
I know on the blind crew, a couple of things that we're working on is being able to read and write using Braille. How could we do, note taking? And again, when you are, with Braille, you are either typing on some type of keyboard or using a Braille keyboard. But we're also looking at having an experiment where you have to keep track of an object, to simulate a simple kind of, simple task of, let's say, sorting. And, again, in a zero-G environment, how do you do that? Do you, have to keep tabs on the object, using Velcro again, something to do with your flight suit? Do we need to add something to it, like, let's say, a small netting just to keep track of it? So again, simple challenges. We will be a part of the seed docking drill to show, how quickly we're able to get back into a safe position for landing or egress. So.
And from my understanding, one of the other things that's being worked on by the mobility crew for the second flight is, let's say you want to perform a task, how are you going to stay in place? Because in space, most people use footholds. But if you're unable to use a foothold, what can you do to stay stationary so that you can either, say if it was on a space flight, work in a glove box or anything for that matter, just where you need to stay still and use your arms.
Yeah. Going back to like the safe position or for either landing or between the parabolas, did you have to go back and like belt into a seat between them, or what's the safe requirement for that?
So each of the parabolas, we did about 3 of them in a row. So when you're going up, you're laying on the ground, staring up at the ceiling. You don't really want to move your head too much because at that point, it's almost 2 Gs. It's a little below it, but you feel twice your weight. And then all of a sudden the plane pitches over at the top of the parabola, and that's when that weightless feeling begins. So a lot of that was just basically getting into that spot so that you can stay still while the pressure is being pushed down on you, and then prepare for the second that pressure releases that you're going to be floating. So it was basically all aiming for that same spot on the floor so that I knew I had a cushion or a pillow or something behind me to ease that pressure, and again, also to simulate a seat.
Right. And also that it wasn't another flight member that you were.
That too, yeah. I didn't want to crush anybody, especially considering I would weigh twice as much at that point.
Exactly. Das, you got anything?
I do. I have quite a few questions here if you want me to hop through a couple of them really quickly.
Yeah, why not? Bring them on.
Okay, good. Our interpreter's there. Okay. Let's see here. So I think we talked a little bit about this, and Musical Wolves asked, how can zero-G be simulated for someone that would need a wheelchair? Or do they still need the wheelchair in zero-G?
That's the beauty of the zero gravity, is that you don't need the wheelchair because there are so many other ways to get around. My easiest way to get around was I would literally push off of the wall or the floor with a finger. And that microgravity environment makes it so easy to get wherever you need to go. As mentioned, the only issue is just, okay, your upper body's going to go, but so are your lower extremities. So what do you do to keep them, I guess, tamed, for lack of a better word? But yeah, it really opens up accessibility in so many ways. And one of my favorite parabolas was I literally just stopped and watched everybody. And it's amazing to just see everyone doing their experiments and either succeeding or in many cases all of us struggling, especially in the beginning, to adjust to that microgravity environment. And in that moment, you realize that you couldn't really tell who had and who didn't have a disability, because finally we found an environment that was accessible for the majority of people. Because that's the thing, is that right now here on Earth, things are not really accessible for disability. It's not about ignoring the disability. It's about, okay, how do we make things inclusive so that everybody with the disability can still perform the same tasks as someone who doesn't have one? And this really allowed for that, which was phenomenal.
Yeah, like gravity is sort of holding you down or limiting ability to move or motion. When you sort of take that away and you can push off the wall and fly like Superman, Supergirl, whatever, that removes that one variable that, a lot of work has to be done to make that more accessible down on Earth. But by going into space, you've removed that whole thing, huh?
Yeah, it brings a whole new meaning to the phrase, nothing's going to keep me down.
There you go.
Yeah.
Not even gravity.
Not even gravity. It's just the right amount of down. You're going around the planet sort of deal.
Yeah.
Let's grab some more, a couple more questions here. Did y'all identify any advantages that any of the crew members would have over, the term here was pedestrians, but over other sorts of people in the microgravity environment? Like, did y'all come up with anything that was actually an advantage for you?
I mean, I think a lot of the things that were being tested at the time could eventually be implemented to help other people without disabilities or with different disabilities. But like I was kind of mentioning, it was really nice, that ability to realize that all of us were relatively equal. So I think, if anything, it leveled the playing field for everyone so that we were all at the same level and could complete our tasks at the same ability. Because I think a lot of people exclude people with disabilities because they may have brilliant ideas, but there may not be accessible ways to include them. So adding that simple accessibility there, and adding little things like handholds, like Velcro, straps, all of those minor really improved it for everyone. So us an advantage, but I think it put us all on the playing field that we should be at in everyday life anyway.
Gotcha.
Right. And I know, and again, I haven't taken my flight yet, but one thing that has come up on the in the blind crew was many of the blind and visually impaired flyers from the first flight said that they could hear the engine change when as you reach the top of the parabola. So there was a little bit more warning. The downside is that, for what I understand, that within the zero-G flight, it is very loud. So it is something that has come up in conversation amongst the team to say, okay, this, if you are sensitive to sound, this is what, you may want to kind of be prepared for. And we have been looking at some headsets or haptic devices that can help us, because auditory clues may not be as useful in this type of particular flight. The thing is that we're not necessarily aiming to make zero-G, as in the particular company, accessible, even though they have done an amazing job of opening this opportunity up. But we are looking at what happens in our micro-G environment, and sound may not be as big of a barrier, once we actually get into a suborbital flight, in the future.
Right. You don't have jet engines on either side of you making a bunch of noise and vibrations in the plane. The space station, I imagine, is a lot more peaceful than the inside of an airplane falling through the sky.
But at the
I
same
hear
time,
the smell is kind of
I've heard that.
interesting factor.
But you also have those constant whirring fans on the station too. So
Yeah. Huh.
Yeah.
Let's see here. This is an interesting question. I don't know the answer to this one. Has a guide or assistance dog or other animal ever been on a zero-G flight, to y'all's knowledge?
Oh.
not that I'm aware of, at least with the Zero-G Corporation. I've seen, home videos of people doing it, but not a specifically trained guide animal or service animal.
That would be an interesting thing. I think right now in the, I don't know if the right word, level of maturity or demonstration, level that we're at right now, of adding in the factor of a service animal would bring a lot of benefit, because again, a service dog or a service animal is an independent being in and of themselves. So, what we understand, as instructions, then needs to get conveyed to the dog or the, whatever you have.
Right.
It would be kind of interesting to see what adaptive tools would kind of spin off and come from an environment like this. One thing I'm kind of interested in is, the technology for an assistive robotic, kind of device. that would be kind of like a companion for, space flight. I envision that as a society, as we start to go into these long duration missions, something longer than, let's say, a week or more, that you're going to have to factor in the whole range of human abilities, because something could happen on flight, something could change, and you want to make sure that you have planned for and developed kind of redundancies to adjust for that. And I think assistive devices, robotic or otherwise, could be helpful.
You could actually make the companion device cube shaped, if I could toss out that idea. Put maybe a friendly heart on the side of it. Thanks, Portal.
I'm actually considering getting a new guide dog, so I'll probably have to add that to my list of requests for the guide dog school, is a dog who's ready for micro G experiences.
Micro G experiences. Like, a question that I came up with when we started talking about that was, we sort of choose assistive animals based on their size or their reach and all sorts of physical attributes. I wonder if being in a micro G environment and having an assistive animal there would make other animals better choices than what we use down here in gravity, right? Like an assistive squirrel or something like that could be bouncing all over the space station and grabbing things for you. Like, honestly, I wonder about that because of the lack of weight, I guess you could say, right?
Yeah, that would be kind of interesting.
I know there's cognitive.
See where we go.
Right.
Yeah, if only water wasn't the barrier, I would say an assistive octopus would be amazing.
Oh, okay.
That sounds pretty useful for doing experiments.
Right? And they're really smart.
They are smart as well. All right.
Perfect lab assistant.
Let's see. Let me see if I can grab one more question, and then I will go back to looking through chat to see if we can get some more questions. Do we have, let's see. This is, again, I don't know the answer to this question, but I will put it out for everyone on the show. Are there any plans for folks to go into space? Like actually into space? Has NASA ever had a differently abled astronaut or someone with a disability of some sort? Or have there been any talks about something like that?
Not necessarily on the NASA side that I'm aware of. I know ESA has their program that they're working on getting disabled astronauts. They're picking a whole class of disabled astronauts to work on that. But a lot of it, I think, is also going to be more private companies. For example, Inspiration 4 with Haley Arsenault, who had the internal prosthesis as well. So I think that's going to be the future of it. And the fact that a lot of these companies are really early in their development of their spacecraft, either suborbital or orbital. And now is the perfect time to make them accessible rather than having to retrofit them in the future to make them accessible. I think that's the beauty of the timing of AstroAccess right now with everything happening in the space industry, is that we can work directly with these companies and say, hey, if you add a simple Velcro here or a strap there or some assistive device, then your spacecraft will be ready for anyone and everyone, and you don't have to manufacture it special.
Right.
Yeah, I definitely, and I know I have to probably stay within the bounds of what our legal folks tell us, as an employee. I like to keep my job at the end of the day. But I know it's a personal interest of mine. I think, in this scenario that we may have to look to other, partners like, our commercial flight, partners and some international agencies to kind of, push that envelope. But I think, we have to really, look at why do we need this certain, astronaut profile requirements? Do we really need those? And I think, we saw that with when we introduced the educator astronaut. Not to say educators can't be just as rigorous as military astronauts, but I think it's widening that aperture a bit of who actually can go into space flight. And so that's why I'm really excited about the AstroAccess to begin that step towards suborbital and ultimately orbital and beyond.
Makes sense. I think I've got one more question here that's come through, and this is for you, Dina. You had talked about, you orient yourself sometimes by touching things, touching the wall, finding sort of things, and you know where you are. And then when you're in a zero-G environment, if you touch the wall, you may end up spinning yourself off away from the wall, right?
Yeah.
Have you come up with any ideas in advance of your flight that would give you that sort of tactile feedback without imparting the momentum to you, or actually causing the force?
Yeah, we're getting into physics here.
Yep, like something soft or fluffy, or you feel it, but it's not a solid wall or anything. Have you come up with any ideas like that for your experiments?
So I know that actually AstroAccess did have some additional partner flights where they did some additional testing in those environments with different textures, against the fuselage, so you could quickly tell where you are. I think for this flight, they're going to introduce maybe some haptic feedback devices and again, we have to stay within the constraints of, what electronics we're introducing into, an airplane environment.
Right.
But I think that's going to be a part of kind of the final list of experiments that we're going to actually, choose. Will include haptics because, let's say for your watch, most of us have some type of, fancy watch now that can give us feedback,
right.
Whether it's turn left with, 2 vibrating signals versus 3. And I think, one factor could you put a small, beacon or some sort, to indicate where you are on the plane. Who knows? We probably need more flights for that kind of stuff, but that would make sense instead of having to apply force, that action reaction sort of thing. If you could have something that is attached to you, like a watch, with a small amount of haptic feedback, then it would make sense.
Yeah, that's like as you reach a wall or something like that, the watch just goes bzz a little bit instead of you pushing off the wall. It just gives you that little, like I said, non-impulsive, I guess. Like it doesn't push you away is what I mean when I say that. Not impulsive, like,
Yeah.
Okay, Summer, I am going to start gathering some more questions from all of our different chats here, and I will turn it back over to y'all.
All right, thank you. Sawyer, I was curious if you did a podcast episode about your flight experience.
Yes, actually I did. We had a great conversation. It was me as well as 2 other flyers talking about the whole mission, our thoughts, our experiences. It was a lot of fun getting to relive the experience with people and also hearing those different stories, because obviously I had my own zero-G experience. I was very focused on my particular experiments. So it was nice to hear what other people were working on the plane as well.
Has there been any interaction between the first flight crew and the second flight crew? Like, the first crew, are you guys serving as advisors in any capacity, or kind of just there for some feedback if the new crew members have questions?
We are definitely here to help, and that's part of what we've been doing on the ground crew side. And in addition, we also have a few replete flyers who were on the first flight that will be continuing some of their experimentation on the second flight as well. So I think between having those past flyers on board and us who have flown once and are able to give our feedback and help influence future experiments, I think is going to make this second flight even more successful.
Yeah, and so Dina, is your flight also going to be from, I think, where was it, Long Beach or?
Actually, we're going to be flying out of, I think it's, 14 flyers possibly will be flying out of Houston. I'm sorry, Houston.
Oh, okay.
But we did have access to a partner flight where 2 of the ambassadors from the second crew will be flying out of Fort Lauderdale in actually November. So they'll get a chance to go first and tell us all the stories that'll go for us in December. And then I think almost every week we have a all ambassador call, almost like an all hands.
Oh, fantastic.
So again, it's very well thought out interaction and touch points with, both sets of crews and the support staff.
And are there structured post-flight meetings for like lessons learned and analysis of your particular experiments?
I'm not sure about for flight 2. I know for flight 1, it wasn't so much structured, but we definitely sat down and kind of did a debrief of, all right, what worked, what didn't, what would be something to improve upon for the second flight, and is there anything that once we were up there, we realized, I wish I would have studied X or Y. So I'm sure a lot of that is going into the planning for flight 2, and hopefully what they learn will go into flight 3.
Yeah. Actually, I think that's possibly the work that you guys did in flight 1 was what led to the subsequent flights that some of the flight 1 crew did in the spring of, I believe it was 22
this year, 22.
Yeah. And so and then we also received like the notes and write-ups that you guys did for flight 2, and I think that's why we have some additional academic partners interested in this work as well. I think Gallaudet has been brought on, and maybe another university. So
I heard flight 3. Does that mean pretty much? I mean, I would hope there's going to be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But is there already a 3 that you know of?
I would hope so. But I don't know.
I don't think it's confirmed, but I mean, a lot of it is all based off, it's a nonprofit, so a lot of it is based off of people who are willing to help contribute, make it possible, and also just, continuing to have that passion from people that want to keep experimenting.
Yeah, and that would be kind of a shameless plug for anyone who is watching. Like, definitely, share it. That, hey, this is actually happening. I know we get a lot of media press around, very wealthy individuals going into space. But, as I was able to share, like, hey, I'm actually doing this cool thing, they were like, now that is what I would like to see, like regular folks, really, venturing out. And, hopefully we have some people that, have, a passion for this, that have also the monetary means to support it. Hey, why not? Yeah. Then we'll make sure we'll have a flight 3, 4, and so on.
Yeah. Perfect combo. Sawyer, my brain is only just processing the fact that I saw masks in all of those photos. So your flight was, in the middle of the pandemic.
Right. And that's part of why the first crew wasn't international. And we're so glad that we can welcome people from across the globe now for the second flight. But yeah, that was during the pandemic in October of 2021. And so it was great that they gave us the masks with the shields so that people who lip read could actually still see what we were saying. But we had special waivers for the FAA so that we could take the masks off for those of us that were doing the experiments. However, you notice the flight crew still had them as well. But we all COVID tested every single morning. We wore the masks whenever we could. And I felt really safe as someone who's been very COVID conscious and as someone who is immunocompromised. I felt extremely safe there. And they did a phenomenal job of making all of the necessary accommodations for COVID, for, room and board, and especially for the flight so that you can get a face like that and not have to think about accessibility issues.
Yeah.
I love this.
Yeah, and that has definitely gone forward in this flight as well. They've made sure that we have the ability to do COVID testing every day, while we're there. I think we actually might be in Houston a bit longer so that it gives more time for training, I believe, or just, team building. I'm not sure, Sawyer, if how long you guys were in Florida, but that's something that they're factoring in as well. And one thing that is really clear with this flight is that we want to make sure that all of the ambassadors have a sense of like independence and dignity as you are boarding the flight or deboarding or whatever it is, all aspects of it. And that's definitely really important because sometimes in our own flights, domestic or international, sometimes there isn't a lot of dignity that happens.
Exactly. And I mean, we only had a couple of days, 2 or 3 days when we were out in Long Beach, California for bonding, but they really were amazing bonding days. And like you said, the dignity of it all. There wasn't one moment where I felt, oh man, my disability is showing and it's going to make it embarrassing to get on the plane or to put on a flight suit or whatever. They were phenomenal with helping with that. And I think there's actually a picture, Dots, of how we did the ramp, of me getting off of it at least. So the entrance to the 727 that they use is in the back, right under the tail, which is steps. Obviously, there were some of us that couldn't use those steps. So they actually used the ramp that they would load experiments into on the side of the plane and brought this really long ramp that kind of went up and down. You can see me getting off it there. That allowed us to get in through that side hatch and then make our way to the seat through the floating area. So those of us who needed it sat in the front row so we could transfer right into those seats. And again, I didn't feel embarrassed doing that, as you can tell by my reaction there.
And here we go,
That's
Sawyer.
amazing.
This here's a better shot that sort of shows. I mean, not better shot, but there's a shot in the background where you can see the side cargo hatch and the ramp going all the way up.
Yeah.
Gosh, this is a time for your red pen.
Well, this is where I was like squinting at the photos over there trying to find the best one to show that. But you can see that. Oh, whoa, that's not the cargo ramp. Hang on. You can see the cargo ramp there. And normally, so you said they go up like a hatch in the back of it or something, right?
Correct. Right under the tail there's a staircase that folds out. And most people walk up that. And for those of us that couldn't, we had the ramp. There were some people that helped push us up and down since it was quite long and steep to get up there. But it was really well thought out. And again, the huge props to the Zero G team as well as the AstroAccess team for coming up with that and making it so easy to get on and off. And again, as we mentioned, really, really dignified.
Excellent.
Yeah. Dina, I had a question about your day job. So with your work at NASA, I think I read a feature from this past Women's History Month about you talking about like what you do at your job and engaging leaders in conversations about misconceptions related to disability and some of the structural barriers that are there for both the hiring process and the work environment. And I was wondering if you could share some about that work and educate us a little bit more on some of the barriers that we might not even be aware of that exist.
Yeah, so definitely. So the group that I work with, it's called the Early Stage Innovations and Partnerships. So if you think of a funnel, and a lot of industries will use the analogy of a pipeline. In our funnel, ESIP is kind of the widest point in the funnel. And that means that entrepreneurs, students, academia, small businesses, even the general public, if they have a concept or an idea or a technology they would like to present to NASA, or a solution to a problem that we present, they can engage in that work through investments, through grants or contracts, or even prizes that we have. And so the challenge that we have identified is that a lot of folks may not even know that NASA does that has that framework that allows people to get involved with crowdsourcing or even prizes. So that's the first thing, is to let people know from a lot of different communities what's available. For our group, there is over $300 million of investments that we send out of the door to innovators. The other thing is that we want to make sure that folks have access to the mentoring and networking and capital that they need to even propose these ideas. So that's where we're working with our partners, with the Small Business Administration and other support organizations that can help new businesses get into space tech, because traditionally it's been very homogeneous, So, and that's where we're really challenging the perception of, well, who is an innovator, and what kinds of challenges are we solving? Even something as simple as like a food challenge. What does space food taste like? How do we make sure that it encompasses the palate of everyone that would want to eat, whether it is enchiladas or curry or whatever, it may be, that it is acknowledging those diverse needs as well. And then one area that I've been really excited about is ensuring that if NASA is making the investment in companies and in entities, that we bake in accessibility for disabled folks from the very beginning. So if we are able to set that expectation with our investment, then we hope that that will permeate down the line for who they bring on as team members, how we convey information to the public, and so forth. So that I'm really excited about, the work that we're doing. We have a series out called First Woman, that is our first comic book that tells the life of a lunar explorer, who is the first woman in her family to break out and engage in this work. And so we're hoping that as we start branching off and doing missions like Artemis on the lunar surface, where we have additional crews that are living and working there, that we are kind of inspiring that next generation of explorers, and it includes all different types of folks.
That's fantastic. Has the position that you're in been around for a while, or is it relatively new?
So it's relatively new. I think definitely with as a society, we've had to kind of do some reckoning, on some really tough topics, and I think it caused not only private industry, but also government to realize that, hey, we have our own work to do. And I know there's a lot of examples where NASA maybe didn't get it so right. Some people may have seen the Hidden Figures, movie and know that, that was based on real life, circumstances. And so what we hope is that by, through the position that I'm in, and having, someone like myself working with our technical folks to identify topics that are relevant to diverse communities, that we also make sure that we are transparent in how we're selecting our awardees, that it'll make sure that if someone wants to engage in this area of research, that they don't feel like the deck is stacked against them with barriers they don't even know about. So that's what I'm really excited for, kind of going forth, just because we're the entry point to the larger missions that you see, like James Webb or the DART that you recently saw with the asteroid moving.
Yeah.
So
that's cool.
yeah, we're kind of the tip of the spear with that. So
that's incredible. I'm so glad that you exist and that work is being done at NASA. Sawyer, so you've done your flight and you're also sort of, still participating in AstroAccess with the new class, the new flight crew and everything like that. But what else are you up to? Or what do you hope to start working on in addition to your podcasts? Are you going to play in this space in other forms?
I mean, I love working in space stuff, and I'm so happy that within the last month or so, I've now become a contributor for, I don't know if you've heard of it, it's called NASA Spaceflight. I don't know if there's a logo on the screen anywhere of it. There. Oh, yeah.
I don't know.
There's one on the screen, too.
Yeah, so I've been helping.
It's a little known thing.
Yeah, writing articles, editing videos, and happy to also be one of the launch commentators, both on site occasionally at the Kennedy Space Center and just helping out here from home. And it's, I think, a great site in terms of being a space geek. I always used to use it as a reference, and now it's exciting to be a part of it. But I also don't see myself leaving AstroAccess anytime soon, because what they're doing is, I think, really important, especially as I mentioned, now that we're in such an era of spaceflight that people are starting to be able to get into space that aren't military, that aren't, that wouldn't fit the normal mold of an astronaut. And so I think it's exciting to see where it goes, see how these experiments that we were the pioneers of evolve, and hopefully evolve into things that we see on real spacecraft. And I'm just putting it out there. I'm still volunteering for future flights, either suborbital, orbital, even a zero-G flight again. Just throwing it out there.
I'm thrilled that AstroAccess started and is becoming such a great success, because I heard about it through SciAccess, because I started becoming aware of that through Anna's work and at the Ohio State, and they've been doing some great work just in the field of grad school and professional science organizations that also need a lot of this kind of conversation, these conversations to happen, and a lot of change to be affected. So I also want to pull up your patch, because the patch for the first flight was really cool. And I want to take a look at it, and then I want to quiz Dina on whether you guys already have something in development. There it is.
There you go. Yep, that was our AstroAccess Flight 1 patch. It has the braille on it as well, saying everything. You've got the lines there are the colors and the symbols that you would see on the Disability Pride logo.
Okay.
And then on the bottom there, you've got Omnibus Ad Astra, which is everyone to the stars. And that's, I think, one of the main goals with this is to get everyone, anyone and everyone who has that passion and who wants to get into space and to help further humanity's venture into the stars.
That's such a cool design. Did you guys come up with that?
I believe there was a team that came up with it. I was not part of it though, but it was a
design team.
It's just one of those, when seeing it for the first time on my flight suit, knowing that I'm going to wear that for my mission was, my heart skipped a few beats at that moment with just pride of what we were doing. It was, I collect mission patches, so it's nice to have one for my own flight finally, and just acknowledge the accomplishments that we made. And again, I'm glad it's the first one. It says Flight 1, knowing that there's going to be a lot of numbers after that.
Yeah. Did you have a call sign, Sawyer?
No, for the first flight, we did not have call signs. We just had our names. And I still have my 0G tag on a shelf behind me, my certificate and my name tag from it. But that was all we had, was just our names.
Okay. I think for our flight, we are kind of testing out the call signs, just because that is something that is, part of it's synonymous with, flight crews. So as far as our patches, I think that is kind of firming up so that they could actually get it out. I suspect that it will be very similar to the first one, because all of the things that Sawyer shared are very similar to what we've all talked about.
Sure.
We have disability pride. We want accessibility as part of the patch. We want to, be able to say, hey, we can do daring things, so, and it's for everyone. So I don't know what the final product will look like, but I'm excited. I don't know. I don't know, sorry, if you wear your flight suit anywhere else, but I may be wearing that thing till the wheels fall off.
Oh, I do. We also got a cool bomber jacket as well that has the logo on it too. I have definitely taken that to a few launches and try and show it off whenever I can. So yeah.
As you should. Dina, you're mentioning call signs. Does that mean that you have one?
I've tossed around a couple. I have a 3-year-old son, and he is like so tenderhearted. And so maybe it's kind of like one of those, throwbacks to the Care Bears, but maybe like, Care Bears. Tender heart, maybe. I don't know. I think that's what I kind of submitted as kind of a nod to, my little boy. And I haven't quite explained to him what I'm going to be doing. But it is cool because he does, I shared this during, the interview, was that he has almost like a GPS locked on, the moon. He's fully sighted, so he's able to spot the moon, no matter where it is. And I was like, oh yeah, buddy, look at that. And he's like, I'm going to go to the moon. And it's kind of wild to think that, he is probably of the age of that next crew that will actually get a chance to go. And he's like, you're going to come with me. And I'm like, I don't know, but it is cool to be able to tell him the stories of, your mom was a part of, making sure that spaceflight was accessible for everyone. And, knowing that the first flight crew had a very diverse, crew set, that, hey, there's a Black woman on that first crew, and I want to be a part of the second one. So there's like pride all around. So.
Oh yeah, he's gonna have some cool schoolyard bragging rights.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I know at some point I'm gonna be the uncool mom, but I want to be the
Right.
uncool mom with the flight patch.
That's what matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
If I had to
Oh.
pick a call sign, I'd probably go with something like puns, because just that's how many bad jokes I make. I'm sure Josh can attest to that too.
Do you mean you would come up with a pun as your call sign, or your call sign would just be puns?
No, I think I could just go with the call sign puns.
It's just the word puns. Like,
I mean, yeah, I think it would be really cool to have them like that.
well, Sawyer's on the stream, it seems. I've got a couple questions here that I've been sort of pulling out of chat. If we can do a couple more viewer questions, is that cool?
Absolutely.
All right. What are you going to do? Tell me no? Like, I mean...
Right.
Nope, bye.
I'm clicking on everything here. We've talked about some experiments. So you come up with different experiments, and Astropreneur has asked, are the results of the experiments published or used to write papers or anything? Like, could we find any more information on the results of your experiments on the flight?
I believe there are some papers that are being written about it. I don't know if they're published yet or not, but I know a lot of this will hopefully be used for future research and in research papers.
So keep up with AstroAccess there, like follow on Twitter, and you'll have the website as well, and maybe if there are papers that come out of it, that would be a good place to find out about those, huh?
I think so.
Yeah.
And
And definitely on the Astro flight crew, I think, from the previous one and the current one, there are some strong academic folks, there that, they could definitely help us get it, out there in the different, literatures and journals and stuff. I know there was a question of, will we, pursue like an IRB process, which is very stringent. But I think even with where we are now, we have really strong experiments that, could be taken forth to more, dynamic ones in the future.
Makes sense. It's what's the saying? Like, the difference between just playing around and doing science is writing it down, right? So that was a great question about papers coming out of y'all's experiments. There's another one that's a little bit more of a comment than a question, if you've ever been to any conventions or anything like that. But I want to read it anyways, because we were talking about some sort of haptic or other sort of feedback to say when you're sort of like nearing a wall or in a different part of the plane. And Ivy Stiles here said they met a researcher at GT, I'm going to assume that's Georgia Tech, whose team had written a program for the visually impaired to visit the Georgia Aquarium. In the large tank, each species had a different pitch or rhythm. And so as the different fish or things would move around in the tank, I guess you could sort of feel or hear the mix of fish, because they would sort of be mixed together. That's a really interesting idea.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Actually, that would mirror in some ways what we have done for converting, our NASA images from our, spacecraft into something that you can hear. And, different pitches or percussive instruments can indicate time lapses in space, but also the various frequencies that these nebula or stars, emit. So yeah, that would totally be cool.
Yeah, is it like what we're talking about there? If you've seen the things where it's like a picture of a nebula or something, and the little waveform is going across it, right? And it's playing spooky tunes or the noise.
Yes,
it's not that they actually put a microphone out there and recorded what the nebula was saying, right? They took the frequencies that they recorded from the nebula, whether it's the types of gases there or whatever, and they converted that into audio. Right? It's not they recorded it, it's they converted it into audio so that you could experience that a different way. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, actually, though if the oh my goodness, Perseverance rover,
right?
And that launched, what was it, last year? Or 2 years ago, that actually landed. They actually did put a microphone in the spacecraft itself. Now, the spacecraft had its own atmosphere because, sound doesn't necessarily exist in space. But you can go to, I believe, the Perseverance website and hear audio clips of the rover itself being unfolded out into, as it's gearing up and the liquid going into the, different pipes and tubings for the hydraulics and such. But yeah, and that actually came from a brief interaction one of the senior engineers had with someone who is blind to say, hey, can you put a microphone on a spacecraft? And that inclusion of that, element made the experience that much better. So I think the idea that you just shared of putting tones in addition to haptic feedback, that would be pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so cool. Like, just one random idea. Well, the snarky answer would be, well, there's no sound in space. Why would you put a microphone on a spacecraft, right? Well, guess what? The sound of the spacecraft itself propagates through the frame and the material that makes up the spacecraft. And you can record those. That's a type of vibration that can be sound. And so, the snarky, oh, there's no sound in space. There's no air in space, atmosphere, whatever. But there are vibrations that can be picked up. That's actually a really cool idea. Let's see here. There's another one about, we were talking, Sawyer, about, sometimes you hook your feet into things, or I guess astronauts in the ISS may use footholds or something like that. And then I think some of the folks were using prosthetic devices. Has there been any talk about how prosthetic devices could be changed or adapted to be more, I guess, matching the space environment or even more functional in space?
Oh, absolutely. That's definitely something that's been discussed of what would be the most appropriate prosthetic if you needed it in space. I know there was also the experiment of, is it easier just to go without them entirely? Which I know for some people it was the case.
Right.
But at the same time, there was one person who had prosthetics that had hooks on the end kind of for their arms, and it turns out they would occasionally Yes. Sometimes I believe they would get caught and became more of a problem than a help.
Right.
It's a lot of that kind of trial and error, and that's the beauty of these test flights, is testing those things out.
I was scrolling through the photos to see if I had a photo of that. I don't think I have.
I don't believe we do.
Yeah, we've got a couple
I don't think so.
leg prosthetics here, but I don't see the. Yeah.
But what it is pointing out, and I think, sorry, you mentioned this earlier, is just that, having one type of disability is not a monolithic, experience. That, I myself do have some remaining vision. You have a couple others on the team that, are totally blind. But, we, usually have come up with solutions in the environment that we're in right now. And the solutions that we come up with, whether it's prosthetic or adaptive or whatever, are going to be different because the environment and the way you move in that micro-G environment is going to be different. Yeah. So it may take a totally different shape. A prosthetic can take a totally different shape. So than what we would need on Earth's gravity per se.
Yeah, it really makes a lot of sense, and it's really interesting to think about because, think of like a wheelchair, right? And it's designed to support you, keep you up off the ground, let you move around to different areas when you have flat areas and ramps and things like that. But what would a space wheelchair look like if you needed one? It wouldn't need wheels. It doesn't need to roll around anywhere. Is it? Do you even need to be supported? Could it have little thrusters on it, right? And sort of like let you fly around the inside of the spacecraft or something like that? I mean, just knowing that we design those devices to help us adapt and deal with the environment that we're in, when we go to space, we're in a totally different environment, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. Almost like if anyone's ever seen how you get onto an airplane if you're in a wheelchair, they have this small aisle chair that rolls out that's specifically narrow enough that it fits just down the aisle of an airplane. It would be the same kind of thing of coming up with something that fits the needs of the person and the spacecraft.
Yeah. That makes it's really interesting to think about things like that. Like engineering, science, STEM is all about observing the universe and then coming up with either understanding or solutions or things or whatever. And this is like one more set of things that can be designed and solved because that's sort of what we do as human beings, right?
Exactly.
All right, let's see here. I have a couple more. Let's see, we've got that one.
Can I ask a question while you're
of
looking?
course. Yeah.
I just wanted to go back because I remember you saying, Sawyer, that on your flight you had the lunar environment and you also had the microgravity and you had the Martian one. So were all those successive? Like, were there a certain number of parabolas that were lunar and then Martian and then micro-G, or were they separate flights?
Nope, they were progressive like that. It's kind of a way to also ease you in so that you're not right
That's a
away
good point.
going, oh, here's zero gravity, goodbye
Yeah.
breakfast.
Yeah.
It
fair.
starts off with the 1/3, which is Mars.
Got it.
We have
Okay.
1, and then 2 of the lunar, and then 12 of the microgravity. Again, each of them in increments of 3. So we did the first 3 of them as the 1/3 and 1/6, then leveled off, and then the next one was the first of the 0G.
Okay. So cool.
There was a comment that came through. Again, this isn't a question, but this is important to me. Sugar and Magic said, "Disabled girl here, feeling seen right now." So thank you so much for being a part of this,
Yay.
Sugar and Magic, and watching the show. I'm so happy we're able to bring this little bit different content for what we do here on all the different channels. But this is very awesome that we're able to share this with y'all. And let's see here. We've got a couple other questions. I'm running a little low on questions here. We asked about the experiments published, or the experiments being published. Here we go. Alan C. would love a link to Sawyer's podcast, if available. How well can we Google there, Sawyer?
And it's called Talking Space. So
Talking Space.
Yep, and on there is the AstroAccess episode. It was the last one we did of 2021. So it's, if you want some more insight as well from all the flyers and us kind of comparing, it's, I think, one of our best episodes personally. I may be biased, but
I think you're talking. Yeah, I recognize that logo. You're Talking Space Online, it looks like, right?
yep, .com.
Okay, I will get that link over there into chat. And if you're interested in hearing more of Sawyer and the rest of the Talking Spaces team, anyways,
Talking Space Team.
Talking Space Teams podcasts.
Yeah.
I had to think about that one for a second. I'm going to put that link into chat so that you all can check it out. No,
It's not rocket science, it's just English.
There you go. Sometimes more difficult.
Sometimes
Oh.
English is harder than rocket science.
Yeah,
Agreed.
yeah, that is very true.
It's true. Okay, there we go.
I would really like to see, I mean, this would probably be quite in the future, but I think it would be really cool if AstroAccess somehow got down to the level of like Space Camp or like those experiences there to make them so much more accessible as well, or to include people in those age groups in this whole process.
That would be cool.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
years
an
ago
idea.
when I started with the Challenger Centers, I went to my first Challenger Center camp. Again, it's not a motion type simulator, but we did the simulated space missions, and this was the one in Ramapo, New York, and they did an amazing job. And I still have to give huge thanks to John Huberts all these years later for allowing me to be there as a camper. And I joke that I became the camper that never left because I continued to work and volunteer there for 12 more years.
Yeah.
And it was really nice because it was accessible for me. And at the same time, you had all of these kids coming in who were school age. So people with disabilities could see themselves then as the potential to become an astronaut, seeing someone else with a disability, kind of pretending to be one in a way. And at the same time, you're also introducing some normalcy to other kids who may not have met someone in a wheelchair to say, hey, look, we're just like everyone else too. So, you know, don't be afraid of wheelchairs. Don't be ashamed of them. We can do the same things you can.
Yep.
Yeah. And that, I would also say that for some of the space camps, particularly in Alabama, I believe they do some targeted ones to kids who are blind or low vision.
Great.
So yeah, they definitely do exist. But yeah, Sawyer brings up something that is like really important, is that, you know, it's like we're doing this dance or threading a needle between like doing stuff that's really, you know, inspiring and exciting and you know, kind of pushing the edge. But we also want folks to be able to know that, hey, we're people with disabilities or disabled folks, we're, you know, relatable and go through similar experiences as you know, anyone else, so that, you know, someone can see a realistic reflection of what a disabled life, you know, looks like on a day-to-day, as well as, doing some pretty, kick-ass kind of stuff.
All right.
Yeah, such a good point.
I'm watching the clock here because we are going to run out of time here, but I think we have time for a couple more questions. So if you've got questions, tag us in chat. I've got a couple here already. One about, we've got a couple commercial spaceflight providers, zero-G providers, right? There's the plane, but then there's also like Virgin Galactic and Blue Origin where you can go up and break the Kármán line. Do y'all have any preference? Like if somebody gave you a golden ticket and you could either ride Blue Origin or Virgin Galactic, the different types of flights, which one would you prefer to fly on? Let's start with Dina.
Ooh,
either one?
I would have no preference. I mean, I know that actually on the lead team there is someone, I believe from Virgin Galactic, who is offering consultation to AstroAccess, so that expertise is there. So hey, if it's a golden ticket, hey, I want to go. Gotcha. I don't care.
not gonna be picky.
As long as you can guarantee me coming back,
there you go.
Yeah.
Something about not looking a gift space flight in the mouth, I think, right? Like
exactly.
Sawyer, what about you?
Oh boy, I mean, I'll take whoever's offering, that's for sure. I think the biggest thing is that there's, if you go on a longer duration flight, there's lots of other little things to take into consideration accessibility-wise, such as, sleeping, using the bathroom, eating. So some people do those slightly differently than others. So I think that's more of the issue for a longer duration spaceflight. And obviously that's something that will have to be researched and studied and looked into, and something that could be interesting to experiment with way further down the road. So that's why the only reason I might start with suborbital for now, but give me the chance and I'll fly tomorrow. I'm ready.
Yeah. I think what's really important though, is, no matter which company it is just kind of their heart and intent, because that will shift the whole experience in and of itself. If they're going into it as, hey, we want to make this as inclusive as possible, you guys are our partners, we want to, kind of learn from you as well, then hey, that's a pretty rocking experience. But if it's kind of, as a charitable kind of thing, then it has a different vibe.
Right.
So that's something I would look for in a company, is kind of how do they view me as a disabled explorer,
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah.
And I do want to point out that we had people from multiple different commercial space companies on that first flight with us. One of the people, actually, Sarah Gillis, is now part of the Polaris program. But we had these companies there on board the flight with us. So it's not just that they're humoring us, it's that they literally had someone there to look at it, see what was going on, and hopefully take that back to their company and say, here's what we witnessed, and it's doable.
Yep.
Yeah, I hadn't heard that. I mean, I knew about AstroAccess, but I didn't know that this, observer, I don't know if that's the right word, but somebody there to sort of learn from what y'all are doing for, that's really cool.
Yeah, they were the people that were also helping us out with our individual experiments and things, who could then, again, see what they saw, learn what they had to do to help, and bring it back and go, look, this is not too difficult, folks.
Yeah.
You can do it.
Yeah, because that's what I think a lot of the barriers that we experience out there is that a lot of companies or people in general kind of assume that it's going to be really hard or really expensive.
Right.
And it doesn't necessarily have to be. And so if we can have folks, on the flights, and be able to tell the tale, then hey, then they can come back and say, hey, this is not as big of a deal. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfectly said.
Gosh.
Do any of you know if any of like the analog astronaut programs are reaching out to the disability communities or working with anyone in that way?
I don't
Just
know.
curious.
That's a good question.
Yeah, I don't know. You got
That
me.
could be a good one
stumped
too.
Yeah, like Hera and stuff like that. There's the Mars simulant, like on a volcano or something. Is that thing on a volcano?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, in Hawaii.
Yeah, that's what you mean when you say astronaut analog programs, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Because that could be another space to start exploring those.
Yeah.
Breaking those barriers.
Yeah. There was another question here. I'm trying to get a couple more questions in before the end of the show, but are there themes to the AstroAccess flights? And don't know if that's the right word, but is it like one flight you focus on a specific disability? Is it a mix of disabilities on all the different flights, or how do they choose, I guess, the classes or the crews?
It is very much a mixed flight. On my flight, I mean, we divided it essentially into 3 groups for mobility, blind, low vision, and deaf, hard of hearing. And at the time, each of us were kind of in our own sections. I don't know if the future is to kind of intermingle more of the crews, but we kind of had our little section of the plane where, all right, these are the people that are working on the mobility issues. These are the parts of the plane that will be adapted more with haptics or for feel. And these are the parts that will include more things that are sound related. So that was how it was on our first flight.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think we're going to have a similar experience. I think there is an additional, like the neurodiverse crew. I think we have a 4th kind of crew as well.
Right.
Crew team. Then I think that'll I think as we have to balance kind of the ideas for experiments to say, okay, what's kind of some realistic things that we can do, but then it has to go through that filter of like safety checks of okay, what can we do, and still keep the mission safe as possible. So
all right, any last question there, Summer?
No, I'm just excited for Dina to have her flight in a month and a half. Less than 2 months.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Well, I got you then. I got to make a recommendation, Dina. Take one parabola just to do whatever you want, at least maybe 2 of them, and just soak it all in. Like one of them, of course, you see everyone on the flight doing the flips. I wanted to be upside down. And so it took some help. But again, huge thanks to the team working there. One of the parabolas, they turned me on my side. And the next thing I know, everyone was like, wait, why is everyone, on the ceiling now? It's like, no, wait, it's the other way around. My head's on the floor.
Who's on the ceiling?
That's what it is. And I also had one where my grandparents, we have a little joke with the ping pong balls that we collected at a New Year's event years ago, and they gave me one for the flight. So, I took it up with me and just took one where I got to poke it around and really experience that 0G side of it where you're not throwing it or anything. I was given advice beforehand to just hold it up and then release it and just watch it float there, which was cool. And then I could poke it with a finger and then catch it on the other side with my hand again. Those little things. And I also remember one of them, there were people trying to catch the candy, and I'm floating there, and all of a sudden I look down and there's an M&M under my feet just soaring by, just going zoom towards the back of the plane. But yeah, it's those little things that stick out too, because yes, it's a research flight, definitely, but it's also one of those life-changing experiences that only a few thousand people have ever gotten to experience, that feeling of microgravity, whether it be on Earth or in space. And it's so unique that I really encourage people to do it, to just take some time and soak it all in, because I honestly think that helps with your experiments too, is taking that break to acknowledge where you are and what you're doing, and that makes it even more
the human part of it.
Exactly, it makes it more significant when you see a result and go aha. Get that aha moment.
Totally agree.
Literally the aha moment, right?
Yeah.
All right. Well, folks, that is going to bring us to the end of the time we have here today. We do these shows just about every single month, and I massively appreciate everybody joining us here today for this special event with the folks, a couple of ambassadors from AstroAccess. Dina and Sawyer, thank you so much for spending time with us today. This was a lot of fun.
It was great.
All right. Well, remember, we do these, like I said, just about every month, and we do know what's going on next month as well. Our next Virtual Astronomy Live is going to be Sunday, November 20th, and we're going to be talking about how new technology is driving exploration to the moon, Mars, and beyond. And I just said we know what we're doing next month, and I just read that out loud, and I'm not sure what we're doing next month. So join us next month, and we will have a lot of fun figuring out whatever that is we're going to be talking about. Also, Also, remember, the Virtual Astronomy Lives are made possible through the NASA Cooperative Agreement awarded to the New York Space Grant Consortium. One day I'll be able to say that without actually reading it off the screen over here. But that's fine. I try to get it right every time. But that is, again, going to be the end of the show. Dina Sawyer, again, thank you so much for taking time out of your weekends here to share with us your experiences. Dina, I really want to hear from you after your flight.
Yes, I would be glad to come back.
Me too.
It would be absolutely fantastic to hear how you sort of experience that. Your bubbly personality has made this whole show just an absolute blast today. So thank you so much. Also, I want to give a quick shout out all the people that are watching in chat. There are so many people in chat saying that this is a fantastic show. A couple of fewer viewers than we normally have, but the people who are hanging out here today are the true NASA Spaceflight Intrepid Museum fans. Y'all are awesome, and thank you so much for sharing this with us. There's so much nice feedback scrolling through the chat, people saying thank you for joining us and that sort of stuff. So glad y'all enjoyed it. I certainly enjoyed it. Summer, you're awesome as well.
I enjoyed it. You're awesome
Yay!
too.
And hey, massive thanks to our ASL interpreters as well. You've seen them sort of switching back and forth. I don't know that I could do the interpretation for the amount of time that they've done it here today. And then also our captioner, the live real-time captions. That is someone typing what we're saying into some software that makes it appear on the screen. So massive thanks to our accessibility folks here as well, and the accessibility team at the Intrepid Museum who helped us coordinate all this for today. But I'm 3 minutes over the time for the show, so that is going to be the end of today's Virtual Astronomy Live. Join us next month in November, and we'll figure out what that topic's supposed to be about. But for now, we will see you nerds later. Thank you so much. We can all wave and say bye and that sort of stuff. Bye. Always a good time. Thanks, y'all. I guess I'll play the outro music. It's always fun to have music. Let's fire this up.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
The chamber pressure looks good. Doubling up. Roger, roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight sound speed off. Say again, speed off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.